This is the theBreaker.news podcast for the week of October 24th, 2021. I'm Bob Mackin, publisher of theBreaker.news and host of the theBreaker.news podcast. Welcome to edition number 209. The Breaker is your source for news, opinion, and analysis about British Columbia issues, institutions, and influencers. Later, I'll tell you how you can support The Breaker. On this edition, headlines from the Pacific Rim and the Pacific Northwest. I award a virtual Nanaimo bar to a difference maker. And a special edition of the Is It Just Me commentary about the Horgan NDP government's bid to take away your right to know, featuring former BC NDP Attorney General Colin Gabelmann, the father of BC's Freedom of Information law, and the Big Deal feature. Veteran investigative journalist Salim Jiwa joins me to analyze the latest in BC's response to the coronavirus pandemic. But first, is it just me? Is it just me, or does Premier John Horgan have his priorities upside down and backwards? BC is facing two deadly public health emergencies: homelessness, rising crime, major infrastructure projects struggling to be built, rising inflation, and a global supply chain crisis. But Horgan's number one priority last week? It was attacking your right to know. In the BC legislature on October 18th, Citizens Services Minister Lisa Bear tabled amendments to the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. The NDP made the transparency law in 1993, but the new Bill 22 threatens to remove the right to know by charging fees and excluding the Premier's office from FOI requests. Reporters in Victoria asked Bear how much the NDP wants to charge.
This is a modest application fee for non-personal FOI requests, and it's in line with other jurisdictions. Other jurisdictions' fees range from $5 to $50, and I'm recommending a fee right in the middle of that. This is a modest application fee. It's in line with other jurisdictions. So it's a modest fee for application fee, and it's in line with other jurisdictions. It's a modest application fee. This is an application fee. It's a modest fee that's in line with other jurisdictions.
Bear kept repeating the same thing over and over again, but it's not true. A $25 fee would tie BC with Alberta for the most expensive in Canada. Ontario, Nova Scotia, PEI, and the federal government, they charge $5 each. Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland? No fees. Sean Holman has called the NDP's proposed fee a tax on a basic freedom. Murray Rankin is Horgan's Minister of Indigenous Relations. He is an architect of the 1993 BC Transparency Law. In 2017, as a member of Parliament, he said this at the House of Commons Access to Information Committee.
A fee, a toll gate on the public's right to know of $5, a toll gate fee that costs the government by testimony $55 if it's a check to process. So while it seems bizarre in terms of the economics, it also should be seen as an obstacle that doesn't exist in most provincial freedom of information laws. The amount of recovery is minuscule in the grand scheme of things, and all it can be is yet another obstacle to the people's right to know.
Murray Rankin was considered an invaluable asset to developing the 1993 legislation by none other than Colin Gabelmann, who is widely considered to be the father of BC's Freedom of Information law. Gabelmann was the Attorney General in the Mike Harcourt NDP government from 1991 to 1995. In an interview with theBreaker.news, he said that he is opposed to an application fee. He also said the government should let the all-party committee to do its work to review the law, rather than trying to jam through Bill 22.
If the information belongs to the public, then in principle, it should be the public's information at no cost. Now, the old legislation did provide for fees or for costs in certain situations. I forgot the exact language, but there was an opportunity for public bodies to recover some of the significant costs they might incur in answering the questions. But what they've now done is, I think, and I'm quite disappointed by, because in the early 90s, when we did the original legislation, we strived mightily to create the best legislation in the Western world. Whether we met that standard or not, I don't know, but it was certainly the best legislation in Canada at that time for sure. Now they seem to be striving to be in the middle of the pack, to paraphrase the minister responsible now. And I'm just really, I must say, disappointed about that, because that's not what the NDP can be proud of. And but the most important thing here, of course, is that the public is going to be effectively denied the kind of access they have every right to have, because even though the legislation doesn't call for fees, Cabinet can certainly enact an order in Council which will set the fee schedule, and the Minister has talked about $25, which if you're making a request of a half a dozen health agencies or all the universities, or you're making a request that covers a variety of public bodies, those costs are going to just drive people away and make it impossible. And I just think that's a terribly disappointing thing for the government to do. And I'm hoping, just to finish this thought, I'm hoping that the resolution to this might be referring to the legislative committee, which has already been established by statute. We had made sure that the original legislation had a review every 5 years, periodic review by a legislative committee, just to make sure it was kept up to date, and we met any flaws or failures that within the legislation, and kept up with what's happening with modern technology. That committee was set to work now, because the periodic review is due. Surprising that all of this didn't go through that committee to begin with. If the Cabinet and the bureaucracy wanted this kind of change, they should have presented their views to the committee. The committee could have heard from the public, and then in the spring at the legislative session, they could have introduced appropriate, publicly discussed amendments if they still thought they should.
If you feel like me that freedom of information must be free, tell your local MLA to vote against Bill 22. Better yet, go to fipa.bc.ca for an easy way to tell Horgan and Bear to stop Bill 22. That's fipa.bc.ca. As a sidebar to the Bill 22 debate, since 2017 the opposition BC Liberals have been trying to get a list of files on the Premier's computers. Government lawyers claimed it would be too difficult to make such a list, but the Information and Privacy Commissioner didn't buy that. After an adjudicator ordered the NDP to make that list, the NDP sent the Liberals a $2,700 invoice. Bill 22 would also take away the right to access such records. On October 21st, Horgan tried to downplay the Liberal quest with theatrics during question period and a subsequent news conference.
Get real. Who cares? Who cares what's on my screen of my computer in my office? Not many people. What British Columbians want to know is, how are we making decisions? What is the duty to document by government? And, Honourable Speaker, if the member for Kamloops South was in Cabinet with the bill that's currently before the House, there would have been a $50,000 fine for his staff, rather than just the ignominy of having to work for him. But I don't know if you want to zoom in on that. That's my telephone screen. You'll see from that I play Scrabble. I have Spotify. I check my heart rate. I know what the weather's going to be like in Prince Rupert. And I have email, I have text messages, and I have a telephone, and a host of other things that I don't even know what they are.
Meanwhile, the Colin Commission is over. Now we wait until mid-December for Justice Austin Cullen's report and recommendations on how to fight money laundering in BC. On October 19th, Colin heard final submissions from the governments of BC and Canada at the public inquiry, which was ordered by Premier John Horgan and Attorney General David Eby. This is what it sounded like when Colin wrapped up the proceedings.
That brings us to the end of the oral submissions. Is that correct?
It does, Mr. Commissioner.
All right, thank you. I think it might be appropriate for me to make a few comments at this stage. In total, there were 198 witnesses called over 133 evidentiary hearing days. There were 1,063 exhibits marked, which are comprised of over 70,000 pages. There have been over 20,000 pages of transcript produced and posted to the Commission's website. Over the course of the Commission's hearings, I've issued 37 written rulings, 36 of which have been posted to the website. So I think we're at a stage where, while we're by no means finished the efforts of the Commission, we're at a stage where some may down tools now, and with the thanks of my thanks and the thanks of Commission Council for work well done. And I simply wanted to take the time to acknowledge the work of so many people that have gone into making this Commission what I hope will be a success that will bring some reason and rationale to the issues that confront us. Thank you. I think now we will adjourn the Commission, Mr. McGowan, unless there's anything else that needs to be done.
No, nothing further, Mr. Commissioner.
All right, thank you.
The hearings are now adjourned. Thank you.
Go to theBreaker.news and read the story headlined, "Curtain Comes Down on the Colin Commission." This is the Big Deal feature on the theBreaker.news podcast. My guest this week is investigative reporter Salim Jiwa. Salim Jiwa is best known for the 25 years he spent at the Vancouver Province newspaper, including coverage of the Air India tragedy. Award-winning Jiwa wrote the books Death of Air India Flight 182 and Margin of Terror. He is watching very closely the BC government response to the pandemic. You can follow him on Twitter at Real Reporter for facts, stats, and perspective you won't get anywhere else. He was also my guest for edition 170 back on January 24th of this year, exactly 10 months ago. This has been an interesting week. The Protect Our Province group, a group of grassroots doctors and scientists, decided to go online and offer a critical alternative perspective, a presentation for the public online on how public health in British Columbia under Dr. Bonnie Henry is managing or maybe mismanaging the pandemic. What is this about? What does this say about the leadership or lack of leadership of Dr. Bonnie Henry and Minister Adrian Dix?
See, the PR campaign that the government of BC launched initially to deify Bonnie Henry as some kind of a superwoman, Captain Janeway, etc., was a PR campaign to build up Bonnie Henry as a kind of a goddess of COVID. And that failed. Now, we have seen how she has managed our situation in BC, and it's not good at all. And this is what prompts a private group to form. Now, these are some very good doctors. Some of them are hidden still from view because of repercussions. So some of them are frontline physicians who are in hospitals, who are in ERs, who are in ICUs, who are advising them and talking about it. The gist of this press conference that they held was about airborne transmission or aerosol transmission, which BC has, even if it has accepted the principles of it, has not come to grips with the reality that aerosol transmission is the method of transmission for most respiratory viruses. And the previous science that told them that particles had to be a small size to float in the air has been proven wrong by engineers around the world. The size has gotten 20 times bigger for particles to be able to float in the air. So there are three primary modes of transmission. One is so-called droplet transmission, which is the larger droplets that tend to fall near a person when a person talks, breathes, sneezes, or coughs. Then there is smaller droplets which hang around in the air for up to 3 hours. That study was done by U.S. scientists, very credible people, and fomites, which the wash your hands routine, which is probably the least important in the modes of transmission. What we are seeing in closed environments, such as congregate settings, such as pubs or such as schools where we're having a large amount of COVID, is basically airborne transmission. We are not seeing the filtration systems in our schools being up to date. We have modified some of them, but some remain on all systems which circulate the virus.
The BC NDP government has made vaccination the be-all and end-all. No doubt, vaccination is the best weapon to beat the pandemic, but it is not the only weapon. With the vaccine mandate in full swing, Dr. Bonnery Henry has agreed to open public events to 100% capacity, just in time for the Canucks home opener. This seems to be that she's choosing economy and maybe lobbyists ahead of public health again.
Yes, she could be the wealth minister for BC if she wasn't the public health person. What we have seen throughout this area of where concentration on vaccines is the answer to get out of this dilemma, we have seen that vaccines need help. Vaccines are the most important, absolutely. But then with this total reliance on vaccination, and we are not going to get to 95% because of the anti-vax people, because of children under 5 who will not be vaccinated. We're not going to get there in terms of our 5.2 million population. So we have seen this waning immunity. We've seen the number of people getting breakthrough infections in BC going higher and higher. At this point, that is about 30% of people who are getting infected are people who have been vaccinated fully. We're seeing the numbers decline slightly when it comes to hospitalization. But what we've said all along is in the terms of the precautionary principle, is that supplemental measures are needed to help our vaccines. We probably have in the area of 80% to 85% efficiency in terms of the vaccine. But even then, we're seeing more and more people getting sick. She started with interior health, where we saw a jump. She started with a masking order. Then she got tougher after that, saying this wasn't working. And then we saw a third step where in interior health, she went for a full-blown circuit breaker. She started up mildly in northern health. And we knew and we warned that this would spread to nearby areas because you can't afford to have regional restrictions and not close off that area. As long as there's traffic between a region of high transmission and low transmission, there will be spread. So what we need is essentially for people in BC to augment that vaccination program with their own precautions. For example, masking with good masks, using social distancing still, making sure that gatherings at home are fewer. And in terms of Thanksgiving, let's point out that Jason Kenney restricted the number of people who could get together. Well, we didn't. And now in the midst of escalating number of deaths and cases, 700 or so cases per day, so many people dead in October, just in October, over 100 people are dead. Why is the precautionary principle thrown away? And vaccines certainly aren't the full answer.
The NDP government's priority last week was not the pandemic, but making amendments to the Freedom of Information law, including a plan to charge a $25 fee for access to public records. Meanwhile, citizens want accountability for billions of extra dollars spent during the pandemic, as well as the death toll of at least 2,000 mostly elderly people. But the NDP's response this week has been to change the FOI law. They want to hide. This seems absolutely scandalous.
It is scandalous. It reminds me of the country where I was born, in Tanzania, an authoritarian regime where you couldn't even ask the fire department about anything. You couldn't ask a military leader about an airplane that was flying around killing people in my hometown. I was told that I couldn't report from them there anymore. With the NDP being absolutely having absolute power, and absolute power corrupts, and the Liberals being a very ineffective opposition, and Sonia Furstenau having only 2 people. The NDP continuously has thwarted all our attempts to get basic information. We needed information on exactly how many people are in hospital who are off COVID precautions. And now, with all the pressure that we're piling on, they're telling us that there's something like extra 200 people in hospitals in BC, apart from the numbers they give us daily. We have had problems with separating private testing with public testing, which they augment if they're testing the NHL people. They will pile on those numbers and therefore reduce the positivity. We've been asking for a lot of information that's not forthcoming. They would give us a report. They will say we'll have a weekly report on this. When we get the weekly report, that report is already 10 days late. So the attempt to obfuscate, to choke off information is now being augmented by a fee, by putting the premier out of bounds, by putting a fee structure on what information has been obtained originally with taxpayer money. This government essentially is playing PR tricks. It is regime protection, not public protection, that is the priority of this government.
Looking ahead in the weeks and month or so to come, what do you see developing? Where is British Columbia heading?
I think we are on top of a mountain in terms of our numbers. We are on a tabletop mountain. We are not escalating. We are not de-escalating. We are seeing a steady stream of numbers ranging in the 600 to 700 range, which is bad news because it will keep hospital capacity strained. We really do not have room in ICU anymore. Hospitals are converting other rooms into ICU rooms. But where is the nursing? There is a nursing shortage. They're bringing in nurses who are post-operative care nurses into ICU, and take the Royal Jubilee Hospital. They have 2 ICUs now, and they need an ICU nurse to supervise other nurses who are being brought in. We are in terrible shape as far as our hospital capacity is concerned. Every level of healthcare in BC has taken a beating. Surgeries are canceled, postponed, canceled. We can't see our doctor because the doctors were hiding behind the telephone. People are afraid to go to their emergency departments. We had 560 or so people die in the heat dome, which was the worst tragedy that in living memory in Canada. Every aspect of healthcare, from the level of a family physician, to the level of hospitalization, to surgery, to have CT scans, X-rays, all these things have suffered enormously, and our healthcare people are very, very tired. And the government thinks that if they have pots and pans, and praising the healthcare workers, that's going to help them. It's not going to help them. They're very, very tired, and we have a great shortage of nursing. We have a shortage of physicians. We have a shortage of family doctors in this province. we are on top of a mountain. We are riding along, but if we don't reduce our cases, our hospitals very soon will crash. We will not be able to handle emergencies anymore. A large emergency that occurs, for example, an earthquake or a plane crash, is something BC can no longer handle. And in the coming months, I see our numbers staying up because we're getting breakthrough infections and we don't have a program for vaccinating community seniors or having people getting their booster shots that the United States is doing, other countries are doing. We are ending up, our pandemic bus is in the ditch and Bonnie Henry is driving it. And she doesn't seem to be mindful of the need to protect. So we are in trouble.
That was my guest, investigative reporter Salim Jiwa. You can find him on Twitter. His handle is Real Reporter. Now it's time on the theBreaker.news podcast for Around the Rim. We look at news headlines around the Pacific Rim. In Kyoto news, Japan seeks to make online insults punishable by jail time. The penalty against insults is detention for less than 30 days or a fine of less than 10,000 yen. The proposed amendments will introduce a prison term of up to 1 year and raise the fine to up to 300,000 yen. Recent high-profile cases in Japan involving insults in cyberspace include the death of Hana Kimura, a professional wrestler and cast member on the popular Netflix reality show Terrace House in May 2020. The 22-year-old apparently committed suicide after receiving a barrage of hateful messages on social media. In Taiwan news, NBA player wears free Tibet shoes to game. China cuts livestream. Boston Celtic Anish Cantor wore the shoes to a game against the New York Knicks at Madison Square Garden and tweeted a message before the game that said, "Dear brutal dictator Xi Jinping and the Chinese government, Tibet belongs to the Tibetan people." Chinese video streaming platform Tencent cut its broadcast. In the New Zealand Herald, Destiny Church earns money from test site. Anti-lockdown protester Brian Tamaki's Destiny Church is earning money from a COVID test site and medical clinic, it has been revealed. Tamaki has been charged with organizing and attending a protest in Auckland's Domain, allegedly in breach of COVID lockdown restrictions in early October, and then with attending a follow-up protest. Both protests were a hotbed of people spreading misinformation about the Pfizer COVID vaccination. That's Around the Rim on this edition of the Breaker.news podcast. Now it's time on the Breaker.news podcast for Cascadia Calling. We look at news headlines around the Pacific Northwest. In the Oregonian, Portland releases names, ID numbers of protest cops after judge's scathing court decision. Alan Kessler, a lawyer and activist affiliated with the movement to recall Mayor Ted Wheeler, filed a lawsuit against the city in February after his public records request for a list of officer names and their correlating 1- or 2-digit numbers was denied. Quote, "I thought it was important for the public to know who these bad actors were, so I put in a public records request to the city of Portland," Kessler told the Oregonian. "It should have been a simple thing. Turns out, we now know that they had a list they could have just handed over. Instead, they played a game." End quote. In the Spokane Spokesman Review, advocacy group asks KREM to investigate and take accountability for how pornography appeared on an evening newscast. During the 6 p.m. news on October 17th, a pornographic video played for about 10 seconds on a screen behind a broadcaster delivering the weather forecast. Viewers quickly reported the incident to police. The Parents Television and Media Council asked the station and its general manager, R.J. Merritt, to open an investigation to how the video made it to air, fire the responsible parties, and publicly share the specific actions they will take to address the problem. In Czech news, Campbell River whale watching guide fined $10,000 for getting too close to endangered orcas. Nicholas Templeman, the owner and operator of Campbell River Whale and Bear Excursions, has been found guilty of violations after his boat was observed illegally approaching a killer whale within 35 meters near Willow Point. The incident occurred on May 27, 2019, when 2 other whale-watching guides witnessed Templeman approach the whales while also acknowledging over the radio that he was aware of the presence of the pod. That's Cascadia calling on this edition of the Breaker.news podcast.
Your face is gone. You won't stand alone. We'll all stand together, 'cause this is our home. And it don't matter what color you are, 'cause love will conquer hate. So you won't stand alone. You won't stand alone.
The virtual Nanaimo Bar, brought to you by Spruce Hill Contracting. Every week we end the Breaker.news podcast on a tasty note by awarding the goodness of a virtual Nanaimo bar to people making a difference. A virtual version of the province's favorite dessert bar goes this week to the men and women who take away our waste for recycling and for landfills. It is Waste Reduction Week in British Columbia until October 24th. You can nominate someone for a virtual Nanaimo bar. Send us an email to Bob at theBreaker.news. Spruce Hill Contracting, custom homes and renovations. Find more information at sprucehill.ca.
Vaccine, 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 vaccine. 'Cause once you're dead, then that's a bit too late. I know I'm trying to be funny now, but I'm dead serious about the vaccine. I think we all want to get back to normal, whatever that is, and that would be a great shot in the arm, wouldn't it?
That's it for the Breaker.news podcast for the week of October 24th, 2021. I'm Bob Mackin. Thanks for joining me. Did you know that on October 24th in 1929, it was Black Thursday on the New York Stock Exchange, and in 2008, it was Bloody Friday on stock exchanges around the world? Now you know. Send me your feedback. Send me your story ideas to Bob at theBreaker.news. Bookmark theBreaker.news. You can also find us at theBreaker.ca. Sign up for the email newsletter and get updates to your inbox. For news as it happens, follow The Breaker News on Twitter and visit theBreaker.news on Facebook. You can support The Breaker for as little as $2 a month. For more information, go to patreon.com/thebreakernews. That's patreon.com/thebreakernews. Until next week.